10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lascan Corley. There are a number of us here who have been consistent and persistent in raising the issue of Moore Street. And I know I've used opportunities at leaders' questions and other PQs and topical issues to discuss it. But it has been a while since we've had a discussion on Moore Street. So I think that's a positive from Deputy Tobin's bill tonight, that we are, we are having that opportunity, and also an opportunity for you, Minister, to speak for the first time in the Chamber on the issue of Moore Street. I think it's quite incredulous that, on one hand, that the historic Moore Street site was allowed to degenerate and be neglected and fall into disrepair in the way that that has happened. But on the other hand, it's not so incredulous, because we know, for example, Kilmainham Jail might now be an office block or an apartment block, except for a number of committed activists. And we know how much we have lost in Dublin and in other parts of Ireland of our history. And very sadly, some of that has been done wilfully, and I think also, of course, of Wood Quay. That springs to mind. And yet we can do historic sites and monuments and buildings and sites in a very, very good way, in a very sensitive way. And we see that in Kilmainham Jail and the courthouse. We see that Newgrange, Collins's Barracks, Richmond Barracks, Glendalough, Clonmacnoise. There's an endless list. And as you mentioned yourself, the Tenement Museum at 14 Henrietta Street, which you opened last week. With Deputy Tobin, O'Keefe and Haughey, I've been a member of the Moore Street Consultative Group, set up by Minister Humphrey. It was a widely representative group, all political parties, independents, relatives, support groups, the Moore Street traders, under the very able chairmanship of Jerry Carney. And it worked in a collaborative way, with public consultations, with submissions, with presentations. And we all agreed a report. 31 people agreed a report that was launched in March 2017. We were all on the same page, endorsing the report and its vision for the development of Moore Street Battlefield site as part of a historical cultural quarter that would capture, and I quote, that moment in time experience that has been captured when you walk into Kilmainham or Newgrange, or you walk into Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, or you walk into Auschwitz or Dachau. So that moment in time experience in Moore Street gives a sense of how it was for those who evacuated the GPO, who went into Moore Street. It also should give that sense of a moment in time for the citizens of Dublin who were working and living in Moore Street, and also for those 5 signatories of the proclamation who spent time there before the surrender and before their eventual execution. So preserving that was endorsed by all of us, as was the regeneration of the Moore Street market to its full potential. I believe that Moore Street and the surrounding lanes do fall under the heading of National Monument, not just the designated National Monument at 14 to 17. Anybody who walks the route from the GPO will be struck by the many incidents that took place on Moore Street and the surrounding lanes, and in the other historic buildings apart from 14 to 17, as referenced in the Shaftesbury report commissioned by Dublin City Council and the Frank Miles Battlefield report that was commissioned for Chartered Land. And I just give one example, which is 10 Moore Street, as the point of entry, the overnight stay of the leaders, and it was the location of the field hospital where the wounded were treated by Nurse O'Farrell and Julia Grennan. Now, the report of the consultative group, the recommendations are clear and they can be realised, and in my opinion that's what we need to move on. Minister Humphreys accepted the report with its recommendations, and I go back to what she said in her press release in March 2017. One quote, "I believe that the recommendations in the report can help find a way to breathe new life into the Moore Street area, while at the same time retaining its sense of history and enhancing its traditional street market." So just to mention the traders at the moment, the few who are left, and there are only a few, they describe it themselves, some of them, that they're on their knees. They're very fearful for their future and their continued presence in Moore Street. One particular family, 3 generations there on their stall, and they are very fearful. And this continued lack of movement in Moore Street is certainly not helping them, it's adding to their anxiety. Now, the Minister also said in that press release, "I'm fully supportive of this constructive approach, and I want to see the work of the group being built upon so we can progress to the next stage." Well, Minister, we are at the next stage. It has been moving slowly. I'm on the new group. It has been moving slowly, but there has to be engagement with the developer, and I think that was part of the reason why it was going slowly. The unfortunate reality is that a large part of the street, the historic battlefield site, is in the hands of a private developer. I wish it weren't. I wish the state had bought all the street and the lanes, but we have to live with the reality of where we are now. And Hammerson's, the private developer, has engaged with the group. It took some time, but I would have to say that they have a much better grasp and insight and knowledge of the historic and cultural significance of the area. I believe we can work together at this stage in the collaborative way that we did in the period leading up to the report. I'm convinced there will be aspects where there can't be compromise, but there are areas where compromise can be reached. But it does depend on the will of all involved: the state, the public reps, the relative and support groups, the local authority and the developer. I look at point 12 in the recommendations. As the ultimate custodian of our history, culture and heritage, as well as the provider of key services, the role of the state in the future of Moore Street and its environs is critical. So it does come down to you, Minister, and what you're going to do to support the group in implementing the recommendations. I understand where Deputy Tobin is coming from with his bill. I agree with the sentiments in it, but I do believe that we have to support your amendment just to see what support you're going to give to the forum so that it can move ahead on what needs to be done. So my question is, and I heard you saying we have to wait for the broader vision, why can we not start on 14 to 17 now? Money was spent on securing the roof, so that much has been done. But the buildings are fragile, and the longer that they are left without restoration, I think the more damage, the more potential for damage that there is. I don't see why we have to wait. It would be good to see this starting before we come into another winter so that it can be restored in the most sensitive way possible. And we do need a real time frame from that for the OPW when they are going to get involved. And there is a recommendation on time frames in the report. And the other phrase is, it's essential to maintain momentum. We do lose momentum once a report comes out, but it's really important to get that momentum going again. And Minister, your role is critical in this. So I want to accept your amendment, but I really want to hear what has happened with our recommendations with the report. At Cabinet, have Cabinet accepted all of those recommendations? Have you had a conversation with the Minister for Finance on this? And we need to see much more real support for the advisory group, at the least perhaps to have more regular contact, at the very least with the TDs who are on that group, and then to meet the group as well. And I do suggest you walk the battlefield site with the relatives, because that's the way that gives a great sense of what happened there and the importance. I think it's even more urgent now because of the plans for the Parnell Street Quarter, which were unveiled last week. There's also plans for Mountjoy Square. Because there can be a danger that Moore Street will be left again, because so many mistakes have been made on Moore Street in the past. But it would be good to get a commitment on timeframes and what exactly is going to happen so that we get back that momentum that we had initially. Thank you.